Of all these players, only one will take their civilization to the top, from the Stone Age to the Atomic Age. They will face crises, and they will have to overcome them alone, or by allying themselves with other players.
If this is the Europe of peace, it's because they claim to be spreading peace but aren't.
Well, this is a war.
Local witnesses have confirmed that a team is having a giant picnic.
We're on the map of Asia, and they're battling it out through evolution, arguing over who will have had the greatest impact on history between diplomacy, economy, architecture, and war, which will determine the winner following a score. They will have to fight to win according to the rules of the event. The Neolithic period only includes the Stone Age, and this age allows them to get to know the terrain because their match points are random. They have no right to diplomatic relations with other players during these first 5 minutes. Some players focus on intensive exploration and others only on their region. And in war selection, you can place your town hall wherever you like. This is something that some players have quickly grasped, while others find themselves isolated, as in the archipelagos of Indonesia and Japan. And in this final episode of the second trilogy, we meet up with Bipur, Gilgamesh, and Leorio, who are previous winners. But you'll soon realize that this race for evolution is full of surprises. During this second period, the Bronze Age enabled the first exchanges between certain regions, such as the young state of Dragon, which traded YouTube likes with its neighbor to the south, the Sultanate of Thors. Tensions were already flaring up in India between the people of the southern Rafi Peninsula and those of Bipur in Bengal. Of course, everything soon returned to normal, because it was at this time that diplomacy came into play, and what better way than to cooperate over such a vast territory. But what about the states isolated by their geography? Tiger of the Gobi is stuck in the desert, just like his Tibetan neighbor Yasu is stuck in the mountains. They are spared from their neighbors because their geography is too inconvenient to conquer, but it is also a zone that decentralizes the continent. As a result, in other areas of the map, players like Will, who appeared in Korea, decided to settle next to his eastern Chinese neighbor Tarful because the peninsula was too insecure for his economy. As the world discovered the Iron Age, civilizations understood the importance of controlling this resource. So a period of expansion began, seeing mining villages sprouting up like the capital of the most shared of all civilizations, Japan's Ayato civilization, which decided to colonize Manchuria and make Will's Korea its vassal. Will's Korea his vassal, because if he had refused, he would have been invaded. Then there was that of Solis of Papua, who settled in Indochina, a distant exodus that became a gradual conquest, even reaching the capital of South China, Baros. An armed coalition from Bipur's Bengal and Rafi's South India came to the aid of this common enemy. Thanks to the likes of YouTube, they were able to build new walls and moats, and the fortified capital won a victory over the invading Solis from Papua. This was the first defeat for the colonial empire and marked the beginning of the Middle Ages, with the stone walls that brought down the colonial empire. So here we are at the beginning of the Middle Ages, and on the other side of Asia, Leo's Kazakhs launched an attack on the capital of the small state of Dragon. The assault was swift, and the latter became his vassal. This did not please his Mongolian neighbor. The Khan Gilgamesh, winner of Episode 4, now faced the last winner, and a war inevitably began, with Leo and his vassal dragon on one side, and Gilgamesh and his commercial ally, Ayato of Japan, on the other. From a geopolitical point of view, Leo is caught between his vassal and his enemy, unable to access trade because he finds himself blocked by these borders. So he has to choose between killing or dying, and the two camps are well aware of the current stakes. because when one of them wins, a steamroller will descend on Asia. In Indonesia, Nova of Java and Book of the Philippines have concluded a military alliance with Solis of Papua as their strategic partner. Between them, the three of them dominate the Indo-Pacific and its trade, with Ayato from Japan on the Pacific side and Rafi from India on the Indian Ocean, both of whom are threats to them. Since the recent announcement of the war between the two biggest militaristic nations on the continent, some states are arming themselves with an army by spending money on the army, while others are continuing their economic doctrine. The modern age. While small powers separate the south from the north of the map, they all benefit from the development of their civilization by growing richer. On the side of the Indus River, the Sultanate of Thors was a veritable mine of wealth, which got on neutrally with its neighbors to the north and east, but which was at loggerheads with those of India. Following an ultimatum from the Indian alliance, a semi-vassal pact was concluded between them. Concerning Tibet, the latter had a slow but sure advance, thanks to its reliefs and its topography, which offered a shield to him vis-a-vis with the foreign power. It was a hub between the minds of the Sultanate of Thors and the nations of the East. Speaking of the latter, this was a very prosperous time for them, with tourism already a source of prosperity in the nation of Tarful, while its ally Baros was well on the way to becoming the leading food-producing power, with the new ideology of Bipur Bengal favoring the production of large quantities of food. The countries of the China Sea decided to unite around free trade and to trade with neighbors who were enriched by the popular platform of the Tarful ruler. Ayato's Japan and Will's Korea were able to support the Khan of Mongolia financially thanks to this flourishing trade. Towards the end of the age, the Khan of Mongolia Gilgamesh sacked the capital of the Kazakhs of Leo and took with him the prestige of having defeated him, sending a message of submission to the world. Sending a message of submission to the whole world.
Submissive as it is, easy.
By humiliating his Kazakh enemy. At the same time, Nova de Java is fighting piracy in the Indian Ocean, fueling tensions between India and Indonesia. And you're not ready for what happens next. The industrial age, the moment when the speed of human evolution multiplies, the period of humanity that sees this moment as a boon to military expansion, the first served will be the first winner. And in the steppes of the Northwest, war is still raging, leaving behind a land of desolation. It's a breathtaking sight for those who haven't yet had the chance to see the damage it can cause. The Industrial Revolution began on the other side of the map, in Indonesia, stretching across the Indian and Pacific Oceans, and Nova, the nation of Java, was its cradle, and the latter had a real advantage. The change was radical, transforming the armadas of the nations into real armadas. His allies heard of the threats made by King Rafi of South India following his interventions in the Indian Ocean to combat pirates. This triggered the dissolution of the Indian alliance, leaving the Sultanate of Thors free to enjoy an economic boom with the Industrial Revolution.
Today, I solemnly proclaim the independence of the Sultanate of Thors from the Bengal Empire.
Bengal's Bipur became neutral, which was a good move given that these lands are poorly protected, especially from Indonesia.
The Empire of Bengal declares itself neutral in any conflict outside its nation.
The alliance led by the powerful Indonesian naval army of Nova de Java caused the Indian power of Rafi to fall after advancing into the ocean. Rafi was thus swept away with its civilization in the face of the naval superiority of the enemy, who bombarded its capital from the coast. Following this tragedy, the headquarters of the nations was founded. The neutral nations were well aware that they would have to arm themselves, not only against Nova de Java, but also one of the militaristic powers of the north. And some are already asserting their position on the scene. With the bloc of the Sea of China, it's in support with Khan Gilgamesh, who for them is worth much better than his enemy. This will have terrible repercussions for the future of the China Sea nations. So here we are, in the atomic age, with the discovery of nuclear power, the world is changing radically. However, the militaristic powers of the North cannot afford such an advantage because the maintenance of armies is astronomical for every leader and the cost of war is not to their advantage. This is why Ayato of Japan decided to declare his support for Gilgamesh of Mongolia.
Me, Shogun Ayato, have decided to send resources and human support to my ally Gilgamesh to protect the Mongol nation and my own.
Diplomatic relations are strained between Buk's Philippines and Barros China over their maritime zones, and the island of Hainan is disputed between the two. Tension is emerging everywhere, leaving Bipur's Bengal and Will's Korea the only ones to remain on the economic axis without taking part in an indirect conflict. For the Indonesian alliance, they have to choose between two possible routes: through the countries of the West, which are not a threat, or through their enemy Japan. And so, the Indonesian naval army headed straight for the Japanese archipelago of Ayato. Meanwhile, it was Ayato's army that arrived in the distant land of Kazakhstan and was attacked on its island from the air and then from the sea, with the Indonesian Air Force ravaging a town with the first nuclear bomb. Will's Korea was not spared and decided just as soon as it was attacked to declare itself independent. What Ayato from Japan couldn't tell him. Of course, some countries wage less violent wars, like the raw materials trade war with Barros and Tarful's China, which is the second biggest producer, against Bipur's Bengal, which is just ahead. And between them, they've got the world in such deep debt that they've become untouchable thanks to their diplomatic pressure on essential resources. At a summit at the United Nations, 4 leaders were chosen to host the world's potential wonder. Buk of the Philippines, Khan Gilgamesh of Mongolia, and Leo of the Kazakhs were also suggested with diplomatic support as their first goal. But it was the Sultanate of Thors that was accepted for its neutrality and recent independence. Shortly afterwards, on the edge of Kashmir, Yasu's Thiberian army launched a surprise invasion into the territory of the Sultanate of Thors. One wonders whether this attack was planned in the event of a diplomatic victory for Thors. Powerful thanks to its mines and industrialization, Thors possessed atomic bombs that were more devastating to the environment than to the battlefield. And even without the expected effect of these atomic bombs, the troops managed to repel the enemy. The world was in crisis. Ayato's Japanese empire collapsed under the naval bombardment of the Indonesian alliance, which greatly worried its neighboring powers. In the China Sea, Traful attacked the Philippine capital of Buk at the least expected moment, thanks to his new naval army and his ally Barros, who stationed his naval army to protect them. A final assault by the remaining Japanese, with material support from Tiger de Gobi for Khan Gilgamesh, brought the war to an end with the Kazakhs of Leo, and to face the new world capital, where it will be a race between the Indonesian alliance and the Chinese-Mongol Emergency Alliance. In this final confrontation with the Free Sultanate of Thors, he finally defeated Yasu of Tibet and turned the borders upside down. A coalition led by the Khan Gilgamesh of Mongolia destroyed Leo's Kazakh, who then led the nations of Tiger, Barros, and Tarful militarily into the Sultanate of Thors, hoping to appropriate it before the Indonesian alliance. In this merciless war, time is running out. Buk's Philippines found destruction against Tarful and Barros of China. As for the former dragon vassal, he joins the side of Khan Gilgamesh. Bipur du Bengal, untouchable in these final moments, remained neutral despite the super crisis. Each side, equipped with atomic bombs, saw the world under fire and ashes. Explosions erupted everywhere, to such an extent that we could no longer make out the map. This is how our story came to an end, under thick black smoke that covered the planet.
Houston, this is ISS.
This video was made using AI. The aim of this video is to test it out. If the feedback is positive, other videos will be translated into English in the same way.
C'est l'histoire de Max, mais plein de passion. Sur War Selection, c'est son addiction. Organisateur d'événements, il fait son show, mais à chaque fois, ça part en overflow. Il veut être le boss, le king du game, mais ses plans foires, c'est pas la même. Comme Age of Vampire, il rêve d'empire, mais ses tours de magie, c'est plutôt à l'envers. Il lance des tournois, il vend du rêve, mais ses alliances finissent sans trêve. Max le gourou avec son micro, et quand ça lag, c'est le chaos. Max dans l'arène, mais il s'embourbe. Sur War Select, son empire s'effondre. Il voulait dominer, mais ça part en vrille dans ce jeu de guerre. Il joue la comédie.